Good morning, everybody. Howard Greenwood here, as you can see. Um, I, I'm always really nervous about changing the name on the screen in case anybody, doesn't know it's not Howard. But there you go. Um, so, welcome to Jump's webinar. And just so you know, I'm not Howard Greenwood. Howard is enjoying a tour on the other side of the world in Australia at the moment, having a really tremendous time. But today we've got Martin and Paul joining me to talk about that really fine line between balancing mental motivation and avoiding exhaustion in recruitment. And frankly, after the last few years that we've had, I think we all know about balancing motivation and avoiding exhaustion in recruitment. So thank you all for joining us. I have done a Howard and got a few statistics for us because I know everybody likes a few statistics to get us going. As leaders of organizations whose success is really built on the people we employ, we all know that motivation is a predictor of productivity. And we build our businesses around motivating our consultants. We want them to do a good job, and then we incentivize them and reward them for doing that, for that success. But getting the balance right between focusing on success and pushing too hard is a tightrope. Mental health in the workplace is a critical concern. And I've got some statistics about the current kind of mental health landscape. So the latest data I could find for the UK is 2023. And that estimates that 875,000 UK workers suffered from work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. And that led to 17.1 million working days lost in that year. Now, I've not seen anything at all that suggests that's got better. In fact, I'd suggest that probably the data's got worse. A more recent survey said that 10% of UK workers are considering taking extended leave, and an additional 20% have contemplated quitting their jobs in the last year, with mental health deterioration being a primary factor. So this isn't the majority of workers, but it's a significant minority of workers that we need to think about. And thinking about it from the employee perspective, 92% of workers believe that it's important to work for an organisation that values their emotional and psychological well-being. So employees want us to care about this. And if you look at the category 18 to 29-year-olds, and let's face it, there's a lot of people in our industry who are aged between 18 and 29, 15% rated their mental health as somewhat poor. And entry-level employees are less likely to describe their mental health as very good compared to executive level employees. So it's 35, 48%. So, these statistics, they're really underscoring that pressing need for organisations to prioritise mental health initiatives, to foster supportive environments, to promote well-being in order to have organisational success. So, as ever with Jump, we're going to share our experience, our understanding, and some kind of techniques and tools and information and discussion on this area for you. Please join in. So if you've got specific questions or comments on anything that we're talking about, please use the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that so that we can take questions as we go.
She's good, isn't she, Martin? I mean, I have to say, I think we should strongly consider booting Howard out, don't you think? So much better.
Right, so here we go. So how can you, in a recruitment business, sustain high levels of performance in your teams, particularly during challenging performance periods?
Well, look, I think this is a really big question. And you've kind of touched on a lot of this, Heather. I think we're a business and industry, an industry that tends to understandably sets targets for people. It's anyone that's worked in the industry for a lengthy period of time will know that it's never ending. The level of target setting and pushing of people to hit numbers is never ending, unrelenting, and it's unrelenting if you've been in it forever. It's the same every day, every week, every month. I think what we need is context here. We need high levels of performance, and yet we are working in are very challenging at times. There's a huge amount going on out there that is way beyond any normal human being's control. So I think it's about focusing on the things that we can control, but I think it's giving context as well to what goes on. And I speak as somebody, of course, that has been, whose work life has been, or life has been dominated by my profession and my work. So probably not the best person to give this advice, but it is about trying to get that correct work-life balance, so that you are caring for your people. You're not going to get the best out of them if they're totally burnt out and exhausted. So it's about finding the correct balance. It's also very much about ensuring that. If you've had a bad day, you're giving your people, if they've had a bad day, you're giving them the support they need. It's, as I often say to people, if you've had a bad day, the sun's going to set tonight and it'll rise again tomorrow morning. So giving some context to what we're doing. I know we all think it's desperately serious, and I think it probably is, but it isn't life and death. So I think context is important, but it's also very important to make sure that you're very close to your people, that you're speaking to them regularly, that communication is at a very amplified level, and you're providing the level of support that you believe each individual needs. So it's different for everybody. It's not easy to sort of kind of have a broad brush approach to taking care of people. Everyone is rather different. We're motivated in different ways. We're wired in different ways. I'm sure I could go on for hours. I can see Martin giving me the eye, so I'm going to let Martin speak for a few moments.
Well, I think that the question around sustaining high levels of performance, your point about context is spot on. In the current market, what is a high level of performance? What should we be expecting from our staff? And it's also recognizing that should we expect the same cookie cutter high performance from every member of staff? What's good for one might be average for another. So we have to understand our team in that level, as you've mentioned there. I would also say that as a leader and an owner of a business, you need to own that definition of high performance and be really transparent and clear with the business as to what that is. But within that framework, my way of sustaining that high level of performance is to engage the business in helping you create the how do we get there. So the non-negotiable are the targets. Then beyond that, how do you think is the best route to those targets for you as an individual and for us as a team? That way, you're going to get far more commitment, engagement, and probably better mental health from your team because they feel part of the solution. It's not happening to them. But then to your point as well, Paul, around, we are a sales-driven industry. When we understand what high performance is, we also have to be pretty clear on what poor performance is. And just because we're in a challenging environment, it's not the time to allow underperformance. And I don't necessarily mean output-based performance, I mean input-based performance. If you tolerate and let someone who's not working hard at driving their behaviors, their activities, that can have an effect on your business, which says we accept that level within our organization. And that can demotivate good performers as much as anything. So I think having that really clear, well-communicated non-negotiables as to what performance is expected, but then engage the business, bring them in and make them feel that they're part of the solution as to driving it forwards.
Okay, lovely. They're great answers from both of you. So set the bar nice and high for the rest of my questions as we go. Okay.
We'll try.
So there's a lot about the way the organization contextualizes performance that you're both talking about, yeah, and about that piece around consistency and transparency and inclusion in individuals so that they get that, I don't know, a sense of control over what's going on. I think, Paul, that's what you're talking about, including people in the how. What can leaders and managers do to reduce stress whilst maintaining a high performance team?
So, I mean, I think this is a great question. And if I think about the things that stress me personally, so I'll give a sort of personal answer to this, I tend to find my levels of stress increase when I feel overwhelmed by situations, particularly situations that I have limited or no control over. I'm always able to deal with my stress levels when I move towards taking control. When I become proactive around things. I think when you are faced with situations where the situation you have to deal with is beyond your knowledge base, so you don't have the skill sets or the experience to deal with them. So one of the answers to this, I think, to cope with stress as far as a challenging environment is concerned, is to make sure you're constantly coaching and supporting your people. We work in an ever-changing, and it's a rapidly changing environment. I mean, I'm now, as I'm sure you guys are, being asked questions weekly for the first time. I mean, I've been in this industry for, I don't know, 40, nearly 50 years, and for the most part, I've been asked questions over my career that I was comfortable answering. Now it's all about AI and what's going on with tech and stuff, and you're really kind of just desperately trying to keep on sort of in touch with what's going on and on the curve. So I think that because we know things are moving at such a rapid rate, it's our responsibility, even with our long-serving, high-performing people, particularly, in fact, you might argue with those people, to make sure that they're fully supported, they're constantly coached, they're upskilled, so that the new challenges they face are things that they can cope with. And they're enabled then to be able to do what I said earlier, which is to wrap their arms around challenges and problems and take control. So I think part of it is making sure you give people the tools to cope, not just from a support mechanism, not just in terms of their mental health, but also the skill sets they need in this modern world, which is ever changing and developing, to be able to deal with the challenges put forward from clients and candidates and just the general environment that we work in. And I think that definitely, coming back to my point, reduces stress. If you feel that you are in control because you know what you're doing, or you have a sense of being able to deal with something and you're moving forward, you're being proactive, I think that can contain stress. But I'll come back to my first point, and that is that I think we often talk about stress. I think stress is a word that I think, and you guys will probably correct me, you usually do. So I think this comes from, I can't even use the phrase, is it metallurgical? Yeah, that wasn't bad. So I think it's reference to steel. It's the point at which steel snaps or something along those lines. And we use the phrase stress a lot, all the time. I do sometimes, I hear it overused. I'm not sure that very often, and I'm not putting down stress. It's obviously there, it's important, and you made reference to it, Heather, with the stats. So I'm by no means demeaning those stats, but I do think that we often talk about stress when it's really about being challenged, not really stressed to the point of breaking point. So I think we have to be quite clear about what is stress. And I think we talk a lot about stress in the workplace. I think it's our duty as managers and owners of businesses to make sure that we are very close to our people, to make sure that if they're feeling a level of stress, well, what level is it? Can we help them with it? Is it an upskilling situation? Is it some moral support, some pastoral care? Or is it something that is really getting beyond the point? So we need to jump in very hard, maybe even bring in external support to assist those people. I don't know if that kind of goes around the subject, but I hope I've got somewhere close to giving you a decent answer on that.
Thank you, Paul. Martin?
Yeah, I was just saying, nodding away, Paul, because your use of the word control, I think, is perfect. When I think back, and I'll be very clear here, and I'll talk on your behalf as well, Paul. We're not psychologists. We're talking from personal experience about stress in this in this role. When I think about my career, when I have experienced the most stress, it's not been stress that's been put on me by other people. It's been stress that I've put on myself.
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
To your point, Paul, that comes from a lack of knowledge, a lack of control of what's going on. I feel stressed when I don't have a plan to overcome a problem.
Yeah.
It's not the problem that causes the stress for me. It's not knowing how to overcome it.
Yep.
So I think the question being around how do leaders reduce stress, for me, it's communicate. Talk to your business about your plans for the organization. Even if you acknowledge that it's a challenging period at the moment, tell them and show them what you're doing to help overcome that and what their role is in playing a part to succeed with that plan, so that they feel part of the solution, that they know that someone has a tight grip of the steering wheel and that we're going in the right direction. And then I've also felt a reduction in stress when I know that my manager or leader understands my strengths and weaknesses. It's not that I don't have any weaknesses, it's that my manager understands them, accepts them, and works with me to mitigate them. So that conversation, having those one-to-ones, understanding your staff's challenges and where they have fears about their own capability, and then building a plan with them to mitigate, to offset, or even bring someone else in to help, focus on what they're good at, don't focus on what they're bad at. And I think that helps to reduce the stress as well. So building that culture of tell me what worries you, tell me what keeps you awake at night, and let's solve it together. I think that really helps reduce stress. And again, the caveat being that isn't about reducing standards. It's about acknowledging the challenges that already exist and trying to find ways to overcome them.
I think it's a great answer. Could I just interject and say that I mean, somebody's stress level is someone else's idea of an adrenaline pump. So I think it's really trying to understand an individual and looking at each person's individuality and trying to address each person's, as you said, and you make a great point, Martin, that it's about understanding people's strengths and weaknesses, how they react individually in certain circumstances. And I think that also comes down to the blend in your team. One of the things we haven't said, but it's also true, is to say that we're talking here about individuals supporting people, but of course, a manager's job, an owner's job, is to make sure that the blend, your team, are blended to the extent that there are, to your point about weaknesses, you've got people whose strengths are balanced against other people's weaknesses and vice versa. And if you can create the right team environment, the right blend of skill sets and personalities, then you have strength in depth, you have strength through unity. And so I think it is about making sure that we look at each person individually, but also I think to step back and consider the overall impact on the business and whether we're armed to deal with whatever is coming our direction.
Yeah, and I would say I've rarely, if ever, come out of a one-to-one with a manager feeling increased stress. I nearly always come out, even if we've talked about a challenge I've faced and a problem, I come out with a plan of how to move forwards, a kind of a relief that my manager shares my problem now and understands what I'm going through, and I have something I can get stuck into. It's the not knowing what to do next bit that really causes me stress.
Yeah.
So I always come out with one-to-ones, better engaged, more motivated, and firing again. So I would say lean into that in tough times. Don't not have tough conversations. They won't increase the stress, they'll more likely decrease the stress.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate at our peril the influence that leaders and managers will have on stress levels in organisations, which is part of the reason for me putting this question in. So in my role in HR throughout my career in recruitment, I was seeing the worst end of it. I was seeing the people for whom stress had stopped being a motivator. To your point, Paul, what is stress? There is a level of stress that's really helpful, that works for us, that motivates us to do things. Stress isn't always a bad thing. Yeah. The issue you get is when we fail to recognize when stress has stopped working for us and it is now counterproductive and it's working against us. And the description that you have there, Martin, of a manager's role in helping to recognize when the stress has stopped being productive and become counterproductive, and then to give you a solution to move forward. I don't think at our peril, we underestimate the power of leaders and managers in that. And as leaders, we have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that our managers understand their role in that and what they can do and how much influence they have. There is no doubt from my experience of seeing the rough end of it, people who work for effective managers are less likely to struggle with counterproductive stress and burnout and mental health issues than those who work for poor managers. And I use the term poor manager loosely. One of the things we really have to do, I think, is constantly help our managers to be the best manager they can be, to understand their role, to provide our managers with the tools and the development, and for us as leaders to understand the tools that they have at their disposal to help people. Because that solution that you're suggesting, Martin, about coming out of a one-to-one and knowing you've got a plan, that's one of the great tools that managers have got for helping with this kind of thing. But how often do we actually sit with our managers and say, okay, what are the tools that you've got at your disposal that will help you deal with overload in the people who work for you, as opposed to just putting some more KPIs in place, just measuring something else, just putting another league table in, or tweaking a commission, or do we actually talk about how do we make the stress in the organization work for us, not work against us? And so I think developing our managers well is really, really important. And that comes from the leadership of the organization. There's another really good tool that I've had managers use, Martin, that I'm sure you've come across it. It's the urgent versus important thing. Yeah, you use that. I think the technical term is the Eisenhower matrix, but there's a million different. Yeah, but It's also in there's a few self-help books that use it, and that's where you sit with individuals to help them work out what's important and what's urgent, and you can kind of create this 4-box tool. If anybody wants there's some really good online stuff. If you contact me, I'll send you some instructions about how you use it. When people are overwhelmed, they stop being able to work out what's important, and the difference between important and urgent. And so you become overwhelmed at spending huge amounts of time on the wrong things. So, the Eisenhower matrix is a great technique and tool to give to managers to help them prioritize what's important with their staff. And I think it's one of those tools that really works for people. So what role then does culture play in all of this?
So I think Martin made a point a moment ago, correctly, that if you're fortunate to have a good manager who listens and give you, and you've said the same thing here, Heather, that can give you some practical tools to figure out the plan, help you to see the woods for the trees and all that business, then that's great. However, not everybody is blessed with great managers, and we talk about culture, and Martin made reference to underperformance causing problems in a business, and no matter what the environment, we shouldn't put up with that. And I think you could, and it may be a bit of a provocative statement, but if you have an individual at a senior level who is creating a great deal of stress and problems in the business, then you have to address that. And that may mean over a period of time, if you can't coach the person to perform at a better level, you may have to remove that person. Because if you talk about culture, you're talking about the leadership, as you mentioned, Heather. It's coming from the people that own or are managing the business. And I think that it's about being very clear about the values of the business and whether people are valuable to you. Howard always says, if you look after the people, they look after you. He always makes that statement. It's completely true. And I think that if you have a policy and it's heartfelt, that your people are, in a sense, family, your family, and a business family, and that you should be there to take care of them and look after them and value them and express that value in a range of different ways, which isn't, as you said, necessarily related to adding yet another incentive in. It can be something as easy as kind words or communication about somebody's performance, or even a pat on the back. It's something that makes people feel better. It keeps them grounded. If you've got the right culture and it's openly displayed and it's clear to everybody and everyone understands it, the values and the behaviors are very obvious, then you can manage stress and you can manage people in the good and the not so good times, such good times. Where you have a problem in a business is where those things are not openly displayed, where there is no real clear idea of the values and behaviors and culture of the organization, and where we often, and it's been the case in our industry, I'm afraid, over the years, where we've seen a kind of boiler room environment, almost a bully boy environment. Thankfully, I think that's on the way out nowadays, but it was very prevalent when I was a young man. And what that leads to is people burning out and leaving the organization. So I think you've got to look at the leadership. You've got to consider the people running the business right from the top. And as you said correctly, Heather, make sure they're supported, make sure they're coached and trained. They have new challenges these days to deal with, and make sure that they can cope with all of that. And if that's the case and they're earnest about doing a brilliant job for their people, then you don't really have any problems. And if they're not, and they're the wrong characters for your organization, you have to think pretty hard about that.
I'd say that culture and values in a broader sense are very much the kind of canary in the coal mine of your business health. In that, if you, during a challenging, tough time in the marketplace, your values and culture of we are people focused and we look after our people goes out the window, you're going to lose all credibility with your staff in an upturn. So I think as a leader, and this is something you cannot delegate to other people, you need to own that you are consistently applying the culture and the values that you want to see in your organization, regardless of the weather outside the window. That's a role that you have to play. So if, for example, you want to create a culture of curiosity, you want people to be innovative and try and add value to their customers above and beyond transactional recruitment, if then during a challenging time you just focus on their output and their revenue generation, you are potentially damaging your culture. So you have to think long and hard about how you conduct, the questions you ask yourself, the things you challenge, and the things you celebrate during a tough time. All of these things are visible to your staff, and you don't get to decide when your staff look to you for reactions, they will look to you all the time. So you have to be really consistent and measured and calm with how you respond to a challenging environment to make sure that your culture supports your business rather than hurts it.
Okay, lovely. Just to sort of sum up, I jotted some notes when I was thinking about this last night. I think sum up some of those things. So forgive me if I just do that before we move on to the next section. If I've missed any or you want to argue with my notes, then just do. So for me, this is what we've been talking about here is setting clear goals, making sure as an organization you're clear and you're transparent, that you're engaging people in goal setting, you're engaging people in the process towards achieving those goals, and that you're engaging individuals with understanding the context of why it is we're aiming for what we're aiming, so that their personal goals are aligned with the company's objectives, so that they're fully engaged in that. So that you as a leader are have a positive mindset. So rather than see you panic about the state of the economy and what the government are going to do next, and what's happening over in America, and they see you seeing the challenges and the opportunities rather than obstacles in what's going on. That you're leading from the front, and that they see you asking for feedback and improving yourself. That they see you as the leader taking care of your own mental health, so that you're acting to improve the performance of the organization. I think we undervalue the taking the breaks thing.
Yeah.
We really need to be, personally as leaders and for our teams, encouraging people to take breaks regularly. If you're triumphing because people have got loads of holiday they're losing at the end of the year, you've got the wrong mindset. We should be really encouraging people to take all of the holiday that they're entitled to.
On that though, Heather, I would say it's critical that if someone is on break, you let them be on a break. The temptation to pick the phone up and call them, send them emails when they're sat on a beach is not healthy. And you can only lead from the front when you go on holiday, make it clear you've delegated to them and you expect them to resolve issues in your absence.
Correct.
Yeah. And that has to work both ways. I think, Martin, that's a really important point, because sometimes it's not that we as businesses are reaching out to people when they're on the beach. It's that they are reaching out to us because they haven't let go. And we have to create that environment that says when you're off, you're off. Like, however tempting it is to want them to carry on, the damage they do to themselves and to the business, and we do that by setting an example, right? As leaders, you're right. We have to make sure we go on holiday too, and that they see that it's okay to be offline. It's okay not to answer emails in the middle of the night. We have to have that downtime. So I think that's really, really important, that we do think about our rewards. Are we rewarding the right things? Are we incentivizing the right things? It isn't just about relentless hitting of KPIs. So just thinking really carefully about that. Using good learning for your line managers so that they stay organized, they know how to prioritize, they know how to help somebody come out of a one-to-one. Because I love the fact, Martin, that that every time you come out of a one-to-one with your manager, you feel better. But sadly, in HR, I see the people who come out of one-to-ones with their managers, and it really didn't help. And they feel worse afterwards. So give your line managers the tools to make sure they know how to help people, how to improve, how to be a manager, so that you can do that, and really keep focused on the opportunity in challenging times. So that's some really positive stuff that you can do around culture and leadership. But how do you spot if you've missed it and somebody is heading towards burnout? Have you seen in your careers examples of what does it look like? How do you spot the signs of burnout?
Oh, it's a great question. I think, Martin said very, very accurately, keep close to your people. The signs are often, around body language. You're just watching people, being close enough to see they're giving out. Most people will express themselves subconsciously. So, looking at their facial expressions, their body posture, the way they're talking, the voice, the tone of voice. There are lots of giveaways, signals and signs. How well do they look? Do they look drawn? Do they look tired? Are they looking after themselves? Can you see if they're are they eating properly? What's going on in the day, the things you can see? Are they turning up in the morning looking more tired than when they went home the previous evening? Do you know what's going on in their personal lives? Now, you have to draw a line here and be very careful. We don't own
We're gonna come
people.
on to that.
Well,
We're
we
gonna
don't.
come on to that
Well,
question.
I'll come back to it shortly, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
a fine line. But you do need to have a reasonably decent understanding what's going on outside of work to help people. But I mean, I think physically you can see those things. I also think it comes down to ensuring that you are, and we talked about this a moment ago, that you're constantly communicating, meetings, one-on-ones, cup of tea here, a cup of coffee outside of the office, whatever it takes to just keep close to people. I also think that it's in their work. Are they making lots of mistakes? Are things going wrong? Are things that you would normally associate with them that they would do well in a functional fashion, are those things falling down? Are you getting complaints from candidates, from clients? Are you actually checking on that individual's performance? Are you looking on the CRM? I could go on and on. I think if you look, you will find. One of the mistakes we often make is that we think that our high performing staff are going to be high performing forever and ever and ever and ever, and that is nonsense. They need support. And very often the people that struggle most are indeed your long-serving, high-performing people, because the market is changing at a rapid rate, and they have an inclination to keep doing what they've always done year in, year out, because let's face it, it's always worked very well for them. And now suddenly it's not working as well, and they can't figure out why. So those are the people that you will often need to give a lot of support to, a lot of extra training and development to, even though you think, well, they've been here 10, 20, 50 years, they know what they're doing, I can rely on them every year to put in X amount of money. Well, can you? There is a point at which things will change. And also, as I said earlier, we talked about it before, health, how are they? So just a physical health situation. As people get older, things go wrong. We were talking about that before we came on. I think all of those things, as I said, there's a huge long tick list, but you've got to be tight, you've got to be close, and ask very subtly their colleagues about people, be interested in people. And it's often the case, and I know we'll all nod our heads here, that everybody knew about something going on before you did. And so be close to the people around the people you're monitoring, because they'll often drop hints or even tell you what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer, Paul. I jotted down that you have to be careful here because everybody is different. And for example, I would look for signs of burnout in increasing or extreme emotional responses to situations. So someone either being extremely negative about something or extremely positive to a good thing. But then I've also thought, well, actually, I know people in the past who, at the drop of a hat, will stand up and F and Jeff and throw their pen on the floor and walk off. But that's how they always are. So it's more the differences to their current behaviour. If that person sat down quietly and didn't make a noise, I would be worried. So it is knowing the individuals and how they normally respond.
Yeah.
And I'd also say about a lack of balance. And I mean that in the totality of their life. So if someone is a passionate golfer and you say, did you get out the weekend? Oh no, I've not been out for months. I just haven't had the chance. That could be an alarm bell for you to understand why. So there is no simple way of saying, oh, I saw sign A, that person must be on the road to burnout. It's looking for differences and extreme changes in people's behaviour, emotional state, and the balance of their life, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's bang on from both of you. It isn't about, there is no one set of tools to spot burnout, but it's exactly know your people, be close to your people, and spot when something's different. Now, it might be because they have started to drink a lot, or they're not taking their holiday, or they are off sick more, or they look exhausted, or they lose their temper about something they wouldn't lose their temper about. They react to a complaint, or you get a complaint, or it's anything that sits outside of normal, in inverted commas, for that person. But the obvious signs are drinking more, being off sick more, being ill more, looking tired, all of those sorts of things, losing your temper, anything that's unusual for people. And we said that there is a fine line here. There is a very fine line. Whose responsibility is the mental health of the people who work for you?
I mean, my view about this question is it's everybody. I think if you've got the right culture and people are looking out for each other, so you have peer support. We've talked at length about the responsibility of the leaders and the managers to be checking on the health, mental health, and indeed physical health of the team. I think that's a given in my book, but I think it's also the responsibility of everyone that works together. I mean, I would always, back in the day when I was working in offices, with my teams, I was very aware of people around me, and if I saw somebody who looked a bit down, even when I was even when I was a peer group member, a colleague, even a subordinate, it wouldn't bother me. I would go and ask, "Are you okay? Is there anything upsetting you? What's happened?" I mean, I was curious because I cared, and I think that if you've got the right culture and you have people that care about each other, then to my mind, it's everyone's responsibility. You could certainly say it's ultimately the responsibility of the people that are senior in the organization, and I guess that would be true. But I think that if you're creating the right culture and it has that level of mutual support that's embedded into the organization, if you can see it visibly, then I think that it becomes everyone's responsibility. But there's one other point I'd make. It's also the responsibility of the person that's actually under stress to say, I'd like to think that if you have the right culture and it's open and people feel empowered to speak and talk about their emotions and feelings, if you've created that culture, you would like to think that somebody feeling really down, really depressed, having a hard time, would actually speak out and express themselves to you privately or to others around them, without any fear that there would be any repercussions. And I think, again, if you've got that culture, then it's not as difficult to help people as it might be in a more closed society.
Yeah, I think when the question starts, whose responsibility is it, and Paul's answer starts, everybody, doesn't give me many places to go.
I'm sorry, Martin.
You can. I always think Paul responds really well to just completely disagree with him.
Yes, no one's responsibility.
No one.
But I think I was waiting for you to say the last bit where you talked about the individual's responsibility as well, because you're absolutely right. As leaders of a business, we do have a responsibility to have a framework in place that supports our staff. But I would say, and hopefully people on this call know Jump, they know enough about us directors that we do care about the staff that work within the organisations that we support. But at a certain point, we are running businesses and operations, and we have to be very careful that even in a good environment, a sales-focused business can be challenging and isn't for everybody.
That's a good point.
And therefore, just because someone feels stressed doesn't necessarily mean it is the fault of the leaders or the business. We have to understand and care for and support our staff, but at a certain point, it could be that it's just not the right role for that person. And we have to have a frank and honest conversation about that as well. So it's about making sure that we understand we have a responsibility, but not the total responsibility for that person's well-being.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really valid. My experience as an HR professional is that when somebody gets to the level of anxiety or burnout where it's starting to impact at work, right? Because it's not always going to impact at work. Inevitably, there's more than one source. So it's rarely just some stress at work or some stress at home that causes problems, right? It's a combination of both. And you're not responsible for the stuff that happens outside of work, but you are responsible for providing a safe working environment, and you are responsible for not making it worse. But it's a very complicated HR scenario when somebody has significant stresses outside of work that are causing performance issues at work, and so this isn't it's not as straightforward as, well, we're just dealing with stuff at work. Sometimes people's stress outside of work will impact, which kind of brings me on to the next question, which is about what initiatives and strategies have you seen work in terms of supporting mental health. One of the things, just to get that conversation going, is having people who are trained as mental health first aiders. To have one or two people in your organisation who are trained, that does not make them therapists. That does not make them counsellors or to provide support. What mental health first aiders do is signpost people to appropriate sources of support and help when it tips over from being something that's manageable to something that's not manageable.
Yeah.
And so having that resource, it says something about the organization in terms of we have a healthy attitude to your mental health because we've taken the trouble to train people. But it's not about saying we're responsible for fixing you, but we can signpost you to the appropriate sources of support, and we will recognize the different types of mental health issues they are. So for me, trained mental health first aiders, hugely hugely valuable, alongside some HR support. So what other initiatives have you two seen that work well in terms of supporting mental health?
Well, just to pick up on your point as well, if you're not doing what you've just suggested internally, Heather, then you can utilize external organizations. So there are helplines that people can reach. You know, if you're struggling, there are helplines and you can call, and lots of businesses that I've worked with have those numbers, if you like. That are in the handbooks and staff handbooks and posted around. People know that if they need to, they can reach out.
Actually, just to add to that, sorry, Paul, to interrupt you, that employee assistance program type stuff.
Yes.
Often small businesses don't do that because they think it's going to be really expensive, but there are actually really cost-effective pay-as-you-go services that you can make available to people, so it doesn't have to cost you as a business a huge amount of money, but it makes a really great statement about we are interested in supporting you. So yeah, do look at the pay-as-you-go services.
That's
Sorry,
a great
I
point.
interrupted.
No, it's a great point. I think there are some practical things you can do as well, you know. So, you know, not everybody is blessed with having gorgeous, beautiful offices, you know, we don't all work at Google, for example, you know, but you can do an awful lot internally within your office. And if people are working from home, help them with their work from home situation. The thing that, you know, I think that if you're working in a dreary place, very little light, sunlight, the desks are falling apart, the chairs falling apart, everything feels dowdy and just old and decrepit. That doesn't help mental health. There are things you can do without spending lots of money to create a warm environment, an environment that people are pleased to work in. And if they're working from home, then it's also about looking after them in terms of where they're working and their desks and their chairs. And I know it sounds pretty basic, but it's an important thing. It impacts me, for example. If I'm working in a nice environment, I feel better about it, even down to the coffee I'm drinking or the water I'm drinking. You know, those things make a difference. I'm there all day. You know, I'm in early, I'm leaving late, and I want to work somewhere I'm comfortable. I feel good. And as I said, I think those things, practical things, can be done to help people feel more comfortable, and they do have an impact. I think you're looking at making sure your policies are correct. So we talk endlessly about, and the word we should abolish this word of appraisals. I don't like the word any longer. It shouldn't be an
They're
appraisal.
horrible things.
It's a
Nobody
horrible
does them
thing.
anymore.
But it should certainly be about regular one-to-one conversations with people, with your people, and I think maybe even mentoring programs within the organization, buddy programs, where you get, as an individual, particularly newer people, the chance to buddy up with a more experienced person that will put their, you know, euphemistically speaking, their arm around your shoulder and take care of you, and provide mentoring. Of course, we do that for a living. We mentor people. It's what we do every single day. Everybody needs somebody they can lean on. So I think there's an awful lot of practical things you can do, both internally and externally, and to your point, Heather, without having to spend lots of money, to provide people with the support that they need within the workplace.
Martin, any to add to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, when Paul was talking about the environment you're working, I looked over my shoulder and saw a huge pile of clothes on the chair behind
I
me.
noticed that earlier.
My daughter's raising money for charity, and so she's selling stuff on Vinted from the town. So there's a good reason it's there. I think the key thing as well, we've naturally talked about stresses in a challenging market environment and the pressures that people are under. But one of the kind of mental health issues we've not talked about is people just being bored. Even your top performers in a good marketplace can run out of steam. They can leave to be inspired somewhere else. And then you as a leader as well can struggle to do the same thing every day. That monotony of recruitment can be challenging. So I would also say, it sounds strange, but look where you can give stretch projects to some people in your business. Not everybody, but people who've been doing the same job for a period of time, who are very good, top performers, they might not also be having a good time of things. So look to give them something different and new to inspire them. If you as a leader, for example, are thinking we might need a different CRM project, don't do it on your own. Bring in a couple of people from your business and say, we have this project that's really important for the roadmap of our organization, and I want your input. Can you help me solve this problem? And you'll get new ideas that will help challenge and inspire you and support your mental health, but they will feel valued, part of the business in a different way than just a fee biller. And it will give them something else to focus on, a palate cleanser for their day-to-day routine.
Love that. Great idea. Great. So the things I would add to that are some kind of practical things for people to take away. Think about working hours. Think about the example you set for people in terms of working hours, not just expecting people to work endlessly into the evenings and over weekends, so that you're encouraging people to take breaks and to prioritize themselves, that you're encouraging people to take some time at lunch, to be away from their desks, so that, you know, the office environment, have somewhere not at their desk that they can eat, encouraging them to do that. If you can create an outside space, do that. Think about how that links to people who work from home. How do you make sure that people from working from home aren't just doing a 10-hour day sat at their desk? So are you encouraging those people to stop and have breaks when they get up and they walk around and they refresh their brain? So things like that I think are really important. Building support systems like buddies and mentors, I think they're brilliant. And actually your Vinted thing made me think some of the greatest initiatives are around having something that isn't to do with recruitment that we do in our business. So having a charity that we support and that we put some time aside regularly, when we don't think about what we're doing every day, and we break the monotony because we do something to fundraise. And I know loads of recruitment businesses do that really successfully, and I think that's fantastic for mental health support as well. So those are the things, and really encourage people to take their holiday. make sure people take time off, and don't celebrate people who have loads of holiday left at the end of the year. So thank you. That really brings us to time. We've slightly overrun, so really appreciate everybody joining us today. Thank you, Martin and Paul, for your insight.
Thanks, Heather.
It's such an important topic. If anybody's got any follow-up that they want to come back to us about afterwards, we're more than happy to talk to people about their individual situations at work. And don't forget, as leaders, to prioritise your mental health. Yeah, think about your work-life balance. This all sits on you. Spend some time thinking about, do you get a break? Do you have some time away? You know, are you looking after yourself too? Thank you very much indeed. And we'll see you on our next webinar in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.